This video is sponsored by Delete Me. Along the coast of Detroit are three unusual structures, and they are not lighthouses. Rather, these are water cribs. While one sits just a few hundred feet offshore, others can be found as far as 5 miles into Lake Huron. And believe it or not, the first of these offshore solutions was set up over 200 years ago, brilliantly engineered to be powered by a series of rivers, meaning what started as a 28-foot deep pit of water became one of the most advanced freshwater systems in America. And it should be said that the three man-made islands you see are just part of a much vaster network of lake tunnels, a subterranean labyrinth the size of a subway tunnel, carved into the very bedrock of the Great Lake. So how did these water cribs come to be? How did they work? And what has become of them in the modern day? Stay tuned to find out as we explore the story of Detroit's water cribs and lake tunnels. I'm your host, Ryan Sokash, and you're watching It's History. Let's start with the context. Before the early 1800s, Detroit was little more than a small farming community where citizens either got their water from local streams or private wells. And even back then, they knew that the solution was only temporary, since the city was growing and technology was changing. With that in mind, by 1825, the city council approved a grant to a group of select locals to build a basic water pump. At the time, Detroit had a small population of less than 2,000 people, but everyone knew that more were expected to join the community. And so the early waterworks began with just two small pumps on Randolph Street and Jefferson Avenue, siphoning water from the river 50 feet away. Though the solution was somewhat dangerous, since waste runoff was already being sent into that same water, resulting in many pandemics. So it didn't take long before bigger ideas came to mind, one of which was a wooden tub on Jefferson Avenue, filled with 9,600 gallons of pumped water from further offshore. The pumps were established in key locations and operated manually. The new system was finally completed in 1831, and by then, the Detroit Hydraulics Company had been formed to manage the public water flow. They started construction of a new reservoir at the corner of Fort and Wayne Streets, near where the Michigan Federal Savings Bank stands today. This new setup was capable of holding 120,000 gallons of water and was powered by a 20 horsepower steam pump with intakes from a nearby wharf. This cutting-edge system worked brilliantly for the time, but in the years to come, Detroit would see yet another massive boom in both population and industry. Developments that were fantastic for the economy, but wretched for fresh water. By the 1830s, Detroit had transformed into the primary gateway for the Great Migration West. Not to mention that following the opening of the Erie Canal, the city's population nearly quadrupled. And all of this happened in a single decade. This boomtown energy brought with it the city's first heavy industries. We're talking iron foundries, massive shipyards, and sprawling tanneries, all of which, I might add, were set up upon the riverfront. And unfortunately, there is no nice way to describe the effect. This industry turned the river's edge into a toxic collection of sawdust, chemical runoff, and toxic waste. Or, if that's not graphic enough for you, let me offer a metaphor that will really resonate. Detroit's 19th century waterfront was as filthy and unsafe as your privacy in the reality of the modern day internet. But fear not, just as Detroit built those ingenious water cribs, our sponsor Delete Me has also come up with a few safeguards. Have you ever been concerned about how much of your personal information is available online? Well, you should be, because every year, data brokers literally make billions by legally accessing user information, such as phone numbers, email addresses, and home addresses. And oftentimes, they sell it to scammers. This leaves anyone with any online presence at risk of identity theft, scams, and harassment. But the good news is that thanks to this video's sponsor, Delete Me, you can regain your privacy. Delete Me is a subscription service that locates your personal information and removes it from shady search sites and hackers. I've been using it for years and take comfort in knowing that things like old addresses and even photos have been wiped clean off the web. They are a surefire way to reduce the risk of your valuable data falling into the wrong hands. In fact, Delete Me has been trusted by a range of prestigious professionals, including judges, political representatives, medical professionals, podcasters, influencers, and journalists. So if that sounds good, use code SOCASH or click the link in the description for 20% off Delete Me. Go to joindeleteme.com/SOCASH, activate your plan, and reclaim your privacy now. Don't wait until someone else misuses your data. Protect yourself today. Remember, online protection is essential for all online users. The longer you wait to take action, the more at risk you are of exposing that information to the wrong people. So, now that you understand how Delete Me can help you safeguard your privacy online, let's get back to how Detroit safeguarded their water. As the situation worsened, radical measures were needed, to the point that in 1836, the Detroit Hydraulic Company relinquished control and sold the reservoir to the city for $20,500. In just 4 years from that point, the city went on to build a new pumping station on Osborne Street. They moved waste outlets downstream and fresh water intakes further upstream. They also upgraded inland utilities to better separate the channels of freshwater and sewage. It was reported that around this time, up to 12% of the population still routinely got sick from drinking the city's water. And so it's not surprising that the people who lived in Detroit were becoming vocal. They were demanding better, safer water. So to further improve upon that system, the city installed new filters inside the pumps, and the filters helped. In fact, at this point, they were able to provide between 60 and 80,000 gallons of fresh water per day. So the water was becoming safer, but there was still a problem. The city's population was rapidly growing again, and so the cycle repeated. The fresh water supply still wasn't going to be enough. And so, yet again, plans were made for expansion. Fast forward to the turn of the century, and the waterworks had been extended much further with the Belle Isle intake. This new intake, built in 1904, was the city's first proper water crib, and it did improve water quality, but it was constantly plagued by ice blockage. Furthermore, as the automobile industry took over Detroit, local demand skyrocketed. So in 1931, the city took action once again by converting that crib intake to a much bigger tunnel. Some sources celebrate this moment as the first time that Detroit went big tech, although the work itself was highly manual. Basically, workers inside of the pressurized chamber at the bottom of the river dug out the mud beneath them until the rim of the structure settled firmly onto the hard-pan clay 30 feet below. Though once the island was anchored, the real battle began, the tunnel. Using the hollow center of the crib as a starting point, Sandhogs began digging a 10-foot wide shaft straight down, eventually leveling out to bore a tunnel 60 feet beneath the riverbed. Now, because the clay was soft and saturated, the entire tunnel was kept under compressed air. This pressure acted as an invisible wall, holding back the river's weight and preventing the tunnel from collapsing inward as the men laid millions of brick by hand to line the passage. The result was a masterpiece of Art Deco engineering. The crib featured deep intake ports that drew water from the middle of the river, far away from the surface ice and shoreside pollution. Gravity then pulled that water down through the vertical shaft and through the brick tunnel to the mainland, where it was treated. And just like that, for the first time in its history, Detroit had a truly pure source of water, effectively ending the city's era of drinking its own runoff and slashing the typhoid rate almost overnight. And the scale was awe-inspiring. For reference, the Springwells plant was dubbed the largest waterworks building on Earth. Even to this day, it remains one of the biggest in North America. I should also point out that the water cribs brought some other positive side effects. For example, a huge range of professionals like stonemasons, engineers, boiler operators, and so on were needed to operate the system, leading to an interesting consideration. The waterworks didn't just provide the city with water, but they also created an important market for middle-class jobs. By the mid-1900s, Detroit's population was in the millions, so yet another major treatment center entered the picture: the Southwest Water Treatment Plant in Allen Park. To facilitate this, yet another water crib was installed. Located this time on the Canadian side of the Detroit River, west of the northern tip of Fighting Island, it was strategically placed to tap into the deepest, cleanest part of the shipping canal. And with this being a heavily active waterway, it also needed to stay out of the way of ships, meaning unlike the iconic Bell Crib, the Fighting Island intake was largely invisible. This was a submerged crib that draws water into a deep tunnel beneath the riverbed. What's more, the intake was the first step in creating a truly regional water system, designed to ensure that even if the Bell system faced an emergency, the southern half of the network would remain pressurized and safe. But even that wouldn't be enough. By mid-century, the city had become the industrial heart of the world, and the surrounding suburbs were expanding rapidly. Meaning, once again, Detroit became a victim of its own success, especially since the river was reaching its carrying capacity. And even beyond that, the city was still vulnerable to the problems of the past, since both the Belle Crypt and Fighting Island Station were still at risk for pollution. This river is a narrow, high-traffic shipping channel, so something like a massive oil spill or industrial chemical leak upstream could knock out the entire city's water supply in hours. And so it was. Detroit's waterwork would need to dig under the Great Lake. In 1968, the city embarked on its most daring project yet. They wanted the deepest and cleanest water available. This meant tunneling 5 miles straight out from the shoreline north of Port Huron, boring through solid shale rock, 230 feet beneath the lake bed. Indeed, that sounds hard, and it would cost the city dearly. This was a subterranean nightmare. To create the 16-foot wide tunnel, crews used what's known as a mole, or a massive machine for tunneling. And because they were boring through shale, they knew that they might encounter at least one extreme danger: methane gas. And unfortunately, on December the 11th, 1971, that fear became a reality when a pocket of methane was ignited, causing a massive explosion that ripped through the tunnel. 22 men lost their lives in this blast. From that point, the project came to a halt as the state reeled from this horrific tragedy. Only after months of specialized recovery and the implementation of new rigorous safety laws did the Sandhogs return to work. All the same, when the system finally went online in 1974, it changed Michigan forever. The intake crib, a massive, submerged structure on the floor of the lake bed, began drawing in water so pure that it required far less chemical treatment than anything before it. After passing through that 5-mile tunnel, the water surged into a state-of-the-art treatment plant and was then pushed through a massive 82-mile-long pipeline to reach the faucets of millions. In other words, Detroit's waterworks became the regional powerhouse that it is today, ensuring that no matter what happened at the river, the Great Lakes would always provide. As for the modern day, there is a surprising takeaway. The Detroit metro area serves around 3 million people, yet unlike Chicago, which has decommissioned several of its water cribs, Detroit still manages to fulfill supply by using some of the original structures. The combined waterworks are now capable of pumping over 1.7 billion gallons per day. But even so, some projections suggest that it's only a matter of time until it won't be enough. So who knows? Perhaps someday the city will install yet another water crib, although I somehow doubt that it will be as beautiful as those in the bygone era. We'll leave it there for now, but I thank you for watching, hope you'll subscribe, and as always, I'm Ryan Socash, signing off.